All right, social media. We're going to get into this issue right now because Facebook, the media giant, has announced plans to introduce encryption that would make it easier for pedophiles to send child abuse images via their messenger service. While many people are excited over the increased security on their own messages, I know I love them being encrypted too, these plans will leave our most vulnerable at the risk of receiving unwanted messages or the movement of unwanted images between countries and between individuals. Most people wouldn't understand how all of this works. I need a refresher too, so we've brought in a technology expert, Trevor Long, to explain it all. Trevor, thank you very much for joining us here. You're going to demystify this for all the laymen. Peter Dutton is very exercised that Facebook is going to continue with plans to encrypt everything it has basically on its platform. He is concerned that drug dealers and others are moving their product around on social media. We've seen some recent big busts in Sydney that would confirm that's the truth. But also the movement of child abuse material via social media and the dark web, and you can explain that for us if you can. The dark web is also a very, very troubling concern.
Look, he's right to be concerned because we want law enforcement to have every tool possible at their disposal to track down people who are disseminating illegal materials or involved in illegal activities. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And so I think it's good that our government is standing up for that right and standing up for law enforcement in that space. But I think we've got to go back a step here and say, OK, so the dark web is a good example. It's a different internet to the internet that you and I use. You use different tools to use it. You use different browsers. There's no Google search there. There's no Facebook. It's basically the cesspit of the internet, and that is where the worst of the worst exist. It's where they share the worst of the worst materials. That's where Australian law enforcement and global law enforcement spend a lot of their time trying to, infiltrate criminal enterprise and find that material that no one wants out being disseminated. But then lift yourself up into our world, the normal internet, and we use Messenger all the time. You've got one phone, you've got another phone from a mate, and you're sending messages to each other. What you want is encryption, and that's a great thing for us as individuals for our privacy. Because when I send a message to my wife or to a friend or to a colleague, I don't want anyone in the middle to be able to read that message. And critically, and this is where you've got to look at the other side of the coin, Facebook have been under fire for the last 12 to 18 months about privacy. So I don't want Facebook reading my messages. I don't want them knowing what pictures I'm sending. I don't want them knowing anything about my personal messages because I don't want them turning that into advertising revenue.
Trevor, can I just jump in there? And I think most Australians would agree with you. It's like the postman opening up your mail before it ends up with the recipient. So I think we all agree with that. I think the point that there would be sympathy for Peter Dutton's position is your mail can be opened with a warrant.
That's right.
Your phone can be tapped with a warrant. So if there is a law enforcement reason why the police need to access your email, your messenger, your Facebook account, whatever, surely we can cop that. And isn't Dutton's point that there is not a warrant capability that Facebook will allow if they go down this encryption regime? We saw with Apple a phone being used in the commission of a terror offence in California, and a lot of hullabaloo because Apple would not let the police access the phone even though the terrorist was killed in the terror act.
And essentially what we're dealing with here is a problem that encryption is, at its very core, it's strict, it can't be broken, and so there is no backdoor key. As soon as you create a backdoor for the government or law enforcement, if we all agreed that was the right thing to do, encryption's dead because it means that anyone can kind of break into it. So the sympathy that we all should have for the government, and more importantly law enforcement, is how on earth are they to do their job if everything on the internet is encrypted? Now, there's been a lot of cases over recent months and years where police are able to show the behaviour of criminals before and after they're caught through looking at their messages. But that only happens when they get access to their physical device. So, Peter, essentially what we're getting to here is we need to make sure that legislation, law enforcement is able to access the devices of suspected criminals at a heartbeat, because that device is the key to the encryption. So I think that's what we probably should focus on is everyone's going to want encryption because we want it for our own personal privacy. criminals are always 10 steps ahead of law enforcement / government.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we need to find the best ways forward, and we need to potentially loosen that regulation that allows law enforcement to say, no, sorry, mate, hand over your phone. We're having a look right now. And that gives law enforcement the key into what they've been doing and who they've been speaking to.
All right, talk to me about drugs on social media, because that's been a big issue, as I said, in a number of busts that we know about, particularly in Sydney. How's that being tackled by law enforcement?
And this is a great example of exactly what we've just talked about. You've got law enforcement now have to operate across multiple platforms. It's not just intercepting phone calls, text messages or letters anymore. They have to be vigilant on all these platforms. You've got drug dealers, according to these reports, setting up public Facebook groups under weird names like Vegetables of Australia and basically dealing drugs under other names. So they call one drug by one vegetable name and one drug by another, and they're basically having conversations in plain sight. So this is
just on that, but they have to, because they're trying to take the drugs to a bigger market every time they're selling them, right? Which is different than the child abusers who might say, here's our special link, you pay your money and you can get in on this. These guys are trying to sell a product, and like everyone, they've got to advertise, and they need the biggest audience possible.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not in that community, but I suspect that people who obtain drugs from one person are sharing the information about who they get it from. So they're sharing account names, and they're actually sharing social media accounts to begin those conversations with each other. So I think what this proves is the massive challenge that law enforcement have today over and above any time in the past, because there is not just one social media, there's not just one app. And do you know what? Even if we're able to close down or restrict one app, another one will be built, Peter. So this goes to the heart of what we need to be funding or authorising, and that is higher and better law enforcement search capabilities around social media. They need to be able to ask social media companies like Facebook and Instagram for access to information. Even if it's not the actual messages, they can absolutely determine who's talking to who. So those are the conversations we want to make sure that law enforcement's having with the social media companies, and we need to make sure law enforcement is authorised to do all these things. And this is going to be the balance. We're going to have this huge conversation around people that are all up in the air about my privacy being restricted because law enforcement can, with one warrant, they can access my phone. Good. That's how it should be. They should be able to get access to my phone, because if they suspect I'm doing something, take my phone, let's find out what those people are doing.
Spot on. I tell you what, when they go recruiting the next round of policemen and women, they'll be looking for the tech geeks as much as they will the fittest and the fastest and the strongest and all the usual types that we've had in our police force.
It's a skill, and that's why education in this space is critical.
Yeah,
we have to have kids that can do this stuff and can be the police of the future.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Well, you've got a job for life there, Trevor Long, because you've just demystified some stuff that was in the papers for us today. Well, I hope you have. You certainly have for me. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Tonight.